This is the big day. It's at 8 p.m. Eastern time, Member States. This kicks off these votes. 1 a.m. our time. So we'll discuss this on the show tomorrow. What happens? But the key thing about this is that these primary races. There's no real proper primary race, obviously, for the Democrat nomination. It's the incumbent Joe Biden. For the Republicans, a lot of people think it's kind of done and dusted, isn't it? Because Donald Trump is so far ahead. What could change? So what are we going to find out today? What are we going to learn tomorrow morning when I'm sitting on the show? What is it possible that we will know that we don't know today?
I think the result will be obvious. I think, with Trump with a 30-point lead, he's polling at 50. It's the highest a non-incumbent president or a non-incumbent candidate has ever run in that poll. And so it would be a real shock to see anything but Trump winning. But the real issue, especially for Iowa historically, is momentum. Who comes in second? Is it close? And also, how do they do versus the polls? So if you outperform, even if you lose, even if you come in second, even third, but you outperform the poll numbers, then it looks like you've overachieved and you can move on to New Hampshire next week.
Yeah, New Hampshire again. Now this is a caucus. And I'm looking up the difference. Every 4 years, I've got, what's the difference between a primary and a caucus again? Explain why this is significant. Why, in particular, Iowa in January, where it is, checks notes, minus 25 Celsius with snow drifts. Not minus 25 Celsius, minus 25 Fahrenheit, isn't it?
No, I think minus 15 Fahrenheit, 25 Celsius.
I did get it right first time. I suddenly thought, it
it's
can't
cold.
be that cold.
It's really cold.
We think we're cold in the UK now. No, it's really cold there. Snow drifts everywhere. Why is that a factor in a caucus?
Because in a caucus, you can't vote during the day and you can't vote with mail-in ballots. You have to go in the evening, 7 o'clock Central Time, and it takes an hour, sometimes up to 3, depending on the scale. So you have to be in person. You have to do it in the evening. It's dark out. It's cold. But there's more of a community feel to it. So you still have a secret ballot, but you can actually have speakers representing the candidates make some speeches. You can talk to your neighbors. It's a little more relaxed than a typical primary where you can vote anytime.
You can vote anytime, and that makes a difference in terms of, but that's why the weather could affect. I was like, who does the weather most likely help or hurt?
I think if anyone, it hurts Nikki Haley. Her voters or her supporters, at least in the polling, are not as enthusiastic. In other words, they're voting for her like many people voted for Biden in 2020. They're voting for her because they don't like Trump or they don't like the other candidates, not because they're fascinated by Nikki Haley. Whereas Trump's enthusiasm is in the 80s, Ron DeSantis is in the 70s, and Nikki Haley's is only in the 30s. So if anyone was going to bail, it would probably be supporters for Nikki Haley.
So one of the things everyone's looking for is how big is the support on the day? Because again, we have this poll about the Conservatives, how people vote on the day. We've seen enough upsets. Brexit wasn't predicted. Donald Trump wasn't predicted to win in 2016. So it's all to play for. But the other key thing I was looking for is, you mentioned momentum, is the second and third place. In fact, I think Ron DeSantis in some
it's really
polls
second.
Find that.
I think in
so
this
Nikki
case,
Haley, the former South Carolina governor, and also, of course, she was former U.S. ambassador to the UN. She is, I think, quite the surprise performer. I think Ron DeSantis, the current Florida governor, who I think many people, and certainly I was among them, thought was just absolutely, just so obviously a good alternative to Donald Trump for voters of that persuasion. He just really hasn't gone anywhere, and he's trailing behind. This is where we're going to find out what their real support's like. But only in Iowa, which is not necessarily the most representative state.
It's not, and it's only 1.6% of the delegates. So it doesn't move the needle in terms of sheer
delegates
numbers.
in the Electoral College
that
decide.
And so it doesn't move the needle as far as the election tally, but it's, as I said, all about momentum. So if DeSantis is polling at 16, very disappointing. If he overachieves, if he ends up with high 20s or low 30s and comes in second, but
he's a player again.
Oh, yes. And same with Nikki Haley. She's polling at 20. If she comes in at 10 or 15, that's going to be really bad news.
And this will be about, again, Trump supporters, they love him. They wear their MAGA hats. They're very vociferous. They're all online. But again, it's like that in England, the quiet Tory vote, where people aren't all over social media, and that's why putting placards there.
It's a great point, Julie. And usually in Iowa, the results don't really track the polling. It's very difficult in Iowa, as opposed to New Hampshire, where it usually is somewhat predictable the few days before the election. But historically, there's always been surprises. So even though George Bush won in 2000, he didn't win by the margin that the polls suggested he would. And sure enough, John McCain surprised by coming in a closer second, a distant but closer second, and then went on to New Hampshire the next week and won.
And the key thing is when everyone makes predictions, so it's definitely Joe Biden, it's definitely Donald Trump. If you look back at the predictions, that everybody who knew what they were talking about were making predictions at this time. You know, the last few electoral cycles,
they were always
were
wrong.
all wrong.
Yes.
All
But then
wrong.
again, the polling was a little closer back then.
Yeah.
So Rick Santorum surprised, and Ted Cruz surprised, and even Mike Huckabee in 2008. But right now, 30 points is the greatest margin ever in the Des Moines Register poll.
And the expectation that these criminal charges, the non-stop train wreck of criminal charges against Donald Trump.
It's been great for him.
Some of which were, I mean, look, I'm of the view that the bringing of these charges has been politically motivated. However, I think these are legitimate charges that he has to answer. I think he's very likely to be found guilty, and quite rightly for some of them. These things can both be true at the same time.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to be doing anything to stop his travel, his journey back to the White House.
It's the opposite. Same with the attempts to ban him from the ballot in Colorado and Maine, and same with the mugshot, right? It's helping him. DeSantis and Trump.
If they can banish him from the ballot,
they probably will fail at that attempt.
Because it'll go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is a conservative Supreme Court.
Even
He
blue
appointed
states,
3 of the judges.
That's and even blue states like California and Michigan have not stopped him from being on the ballot.
I mean, to be fair, you could be on the ballot and be dead.
Yeah.
There have been candidates who've died.
Yeah, Bobby Rush.
There have been candidates
has
who've
been
died
in jail
who have won the ballot.
Right.
Not for president, but have won the ballot, even though people have gone, do you know what? They're dead. Still think they're the best candidate.
But, you know, it's helped him, at least in the nomination process. And there's an argument that the left and the media that's supporting the left in the U.S. wants Trump to be the candidate. So they keep going with the indictments because they want him to be the candidate.
And they want to motivate people to come out and get the anti-Trump vote.
In the same way, but they funded Trump-aligned candidates in the midterms in 22, and it was brilliant because it worked. So they got the pro-Trump candidate to win the primary. So the Democrats were funding these candidates, and then they got killed in the general election. That could happen again. That's probably the motivation. But it also could backfire because you're seeing a lot of sympathy for Trump. Trump and DeSantis were tied last March and April, and then Alvin Bragg came in with the indictment, which was really lacked credibility completely. You can argue that some of the other cases have some more legitimacy, but that one was really outrageous.